The shutdown may be over, but the political crisis surrounding it certainly is not. In a new Washington Post ABC poll, 53% of Republican voters said they think Trump and the GOP are to blame for the shutdown, while the Democrats are taking a victory lap.
I am very glad that Donald Trump came to his senses and agreed with us.
On the far right, the pundits are going hard at the man who made a deal without a wall.
He promised something for 18 months, and he lied about it.
That's a victory for Nancy Pelosi. She has just whipped the President of the United States.
Of course, Coulter and Dobbs aren't the president's only problem these days after the arrest of his longtime political advisor and former campaign aide, Roger Stone, who faces several charges in Bob Mueller's Russia investigation. Now the New York Times is reporting Trump and his advisors are getting worried about the backlash from both that investigation and the shutdown, and that they're, quote, growing anxious that he could face a draining primary of his own. For those of you who think 2020 is too far away to worry about, a reminder that our neighbor a few miles to the north has been tossing around the idea of a December primary election this December, just 11 months away in New Hampshire. And over the weekend, another Democrat jumped into the race with both feet.
We are here because the American dream and our American democracy are under attack and on the line like never before. America, we are better than this.
Harris's announcement brings the count up to 8 Democrats who have either officially announced or formed exploratory committees, and potentially dozens of others waiting in the wings. Doesn't even fit on our screen. So what does the future hold for this pod of challengers and for the beleaguered incumbent? Joining me are Democrat Jesse Mermell, former communications director for Governor Deval Patrick. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Jim.
Anthony Amore is the former Republican candidate for Secretary of State. Anthony, it's good to see you, too. I'm going to start with you. We should say you're a Republican who did not vote for Trump in terms of to get a feel for you. Does this disaster of a shutdown make it more likely that the incumbent gets challenged in a primary? John Kasich's thinking about it from Iowa, Jeff Flake from Arizona. Now even Larry Hogan, who I think is second most favored governor in America after Charlie Baker, he's in Maryland, are thinking about it. Does that make it more likely that someone will jump in?
I think so. I think the poll numbers that you just showed show that Republicans in the United States aren't thrilled with the recent performance by the president.
Are you in the 53%, by the way, who blame the Republicans and Trump?
No, I think it was a joint disaster, frankly. I think both sides are responsible.
You know, I mentioned, I showed a little bit of Ann Coulter, but her tweet really merits attention after Trump gave up, for lack of a better expression. Good news for George Herbert Walker Bush. As of today, he's no longer the biggest wimp ever to serve as president of the United States. Wimp, by the way, who went into the military, 16 years old or something like that.
In the CIA.
Does that Ann Coulter comment free Trump to do whatever he wants, or does it scare the hell out of him that he may lose his base unless he toes the line? Which do you think? My
instinct is that it scares him. I think we saw that when before the shutdown, that when Coulter tweets, the president reacts. And so you see her doing it again, and others as well, as you showed Dobbs. I think that does have an impact on the president.
Did Democrats want Trump, or do they want him to have a challenge? As we know, there have been very few challenges to incumbents, whether it's Reagan to Ford or Ted Kennedy to Carter, that have ever succeeded. Do they want Trump? Do they think he's vulnerable enough that they want him to be the guy?
I don't know any Democrat who cares how Donald Trump leaves as long as Donald Trump leaves.
So what does that mean?
I think we're at a point of past the partisan strategy of, oh, if he's the nominee, do we have a better chance of Democrats getting in the White House or not? Donald Trump is such a threat to democracy, to the fundamental values of this country, that personally, I do not care whether or not it makes it more likely the Democrat wins in 2020 or not. If we get rid of Donald Trump in a Republican primary or in a general election, I do not care. I just want him gone.
Well, you know, one of the things that worries me is I would actually like to see a little bipartisanship here. And I mean, this committee of 17 that was appointed today with mostly senior
I thought you were talking about here.
Mostly.
I was like, we just met. Who knows?
Members of Congress, and apparently a bunch of these 17 that were appointed are deal-making kinds of people in the appropriations committees. I worry the Democrats will be less likely to cut a fair deal with Trump for fear that that will allow the wounds that Trump is experiencing to heal. Is that a ridiculous thing?
I think that's built on an assumption of a normal political timeline. Something that happens with Donald Trump can be over and we can be 400 steps down the road a mere week or 10 days later. I mean, I don't think even the horrible poll numbers that Donald Trump is experiencing right now, I don't think are enough to make him vulnerable all the way through to Election Day 2020. There is a long time to go. I know it feels like it's been 400 years since November 2016, but we've still got about 2 years left to go. This week moment...
Well, but primaries could start in 10 months.
Yes, but this week moment, I don't think means a whole heck of a lot unless it continues and worsens for him in the months ahead.
Should Roger Stone worry him more than the blowback from the shutdown did?
It's so hard to say. Like Jesse was saying, with these things, they're so fluid, it's really hard to say. Tomorrow we might hear something completely different about Roger Stone, but I will say that when you associate yourself with Roger Stone, you deserve the blowback that you get.
Even if you're Donald Trump.
Even if you're Donald Trump.
So let's talk about the Democrats for a minute. I listed the 8 who either have exploratory committees or run. And I made a joke, the 17 that are contemplating it are too big for the screen. We'll try to...
Too big for a debate
We'll try
stage.
to put them up. What are they looking for? I've thought a lot about, I've thought about both sides. But in one hand are the Elizabeth Warrens, who are in your face, Donald Trump. And on the other hand are, well, a guy I think who represents us best is not running. You may know him, Deval Patrick, your former boss, who was not in your face. He was not crazy about Trump, but it was more an aspirational kind of, appeal to your better spirits kind of thing. And what do the Democrats need to win this thing in 2020? Which of those two kinds of people is best suited to unseat Donald Trump?
Someone who's doing what they're doing authentically, right? Deval Patrick, to your point, sort of speaks to those better angels because that is authentically who he is. Elizabeth Warren is authentically, as she pointed out earlier today, nerdy and likes to talk about facts and numbers and get a little bit more fired up. I don't think there's one set path that wins. I think it's about the person being authentic, being someone who folks can connect with, and not have anyone's BS detector go off.
But I've heard a lot of people, I hear that, and it makes some sense, but I hear a lot of people say, if somebody just slams Trump tit for tat every single day, the American people are going to say, I can't stand either of these people doing that. The flip side is people say if you're not tough enough to take on Donald Trump, a la what some people think Joe Biden is, even though he's older, Elizabeth Warren, that Trump's going to walk all over the counter. You don't buy into either school of thinking?
Can we just be clear that no single person knows what works against Donald Trump because nothing really has yet? I mean...
Well, Nancy Pelosi
worked against him, okay, so Nancy Pelosi 2020, let's all put on sunglasses and a coat and freak some Republicans out.
So who worries you the most in this Democratic... I mean, even though there are 8 sort of in and 17 on the periphery, the reality is there are a handful, I think, at this stage who most people think are the most likely top-tier people, even though there could be a surprise, needless to say. Who worries you, assuming you were a Trump supporter, you are at least a Republican,
well, I'm a Republican.
Who worries you most in the Democratic field?
Someone who wasn't on the screen.
Who's that?
Amy Klobuchar.
Really?
Yeah.
Based on what?
Well, she's moderate, so she doesn't scare someone like me that much. She's...
but what do you really know? I would say if I stopped 10 people in the street, the only thing they would know about her is that when Brett Kavanaugh completely lost his marbles at that confirmation hearing and accused her, have you had anything to drink? How much have you drunk? She just stayed totally calm and grown up, unlike Kavanaugh, who acted like he was 4 years old.
Well, that's a good thing for her. And the other thing is, they don't know who she is today, but that's not uncommon in presidential elections, that someone comes out of nowhere.
Can I just say, I think... defining who the person is the biggest threat depends on whether or not your theory of how a Democrat wins is appealing to the middle,
I don't know
going
what my
after the
theory is.
moderates,
I don't know which
or
it
is it expanding the electorate? And if we look at how Democrats have won over the last 2 years, it's by expanding the electorate, appealing to young people, to more people of color, women of color, who have voted in droves for Democrats and are now doing so in higher numbers. So maybe an Amy Klobuchar works if you're trying to go to that middle route, but I don't think she's the path to success if you're trying to expand the electorate on the Democratic side.
Amy Klobuchar happens to be a woman. I think we all know that. How about the woman issue as a candidate? Is it time for a whole variety of obvious reasons?
Pastime, maybe some might say?
No, but is history suggest maybe it's a risk, or is gender totally irrelevant in 2020?
Gender will not be irrelevant, but I don't think it's a risk.
Not be irrelevant.
It will not. It will certainly be relevant. Look at the reactions that people have already had to Elizabeth Warren and likability and talking about whether or not Kamala Harris has or has not dated someone. Gender is definitely an issue, but I do not think it's a liability. I think it will ultimately be a strength.
Are the Hillary rumors ridiculous?
I have to imagine they are.
No, what? No, they are?
They're not ridiculous. No. She, whether she'll run or not?
Yes.
Oh, she can't think of anything but power. There's no way she won't run.
Well, thinking about it, a lot of people think about it, but most people don't do it.
She can't resist it.
So you could see Hillary Clinton running
Absolutely.
again?
Yep.
What's your reaction to that?
My reaction is more to the idea that Hillary Clinton can't think about anything other than power, and I think that is just checking stereotypical box after stereotypical box about women who have tried to serve and advance in leadership roles.
No, it has nothing to do with her being a woman whatsoever.
Okay, one last thing. Harold Schultz from Starbucks participated in what I consider to be one of the most sycophantic interviews I've ever seen with Scott Pelley last night on 60 Minutes. It was almost like it was a PR kind of interview. He was asked the obvious question, aren't you worried that you're going to, he didn't know if they quoted Ralph Nader, that you're the Ralph Nader of 2020 if you run, you've been a Democrat your whole life, you mostly share values with a Democrat. Do you worry about Howard Schultz re-electing Donald Trump or Mike Pence or whoever the Republican is?
Absolutely, and I think anybody else who's part of the Democratic Party is worried about him being Ralph Nader or Jill Stein. It does not take big numbers in these days when margins are so tight to swing it, and for someone who, in his words, has been a lifelong Democrat, I cannot for the life of me understand why he would do this.
How about Bill Weld? I mean, he's in New Hampshire. He says he's there because the New England Council invited him, but I think most people remember he ran for vice president, Libertarian ticket. Right. A lot of people think he's seriously considering a go in the Republican primary. Are you smiling with derision?
No, I hope he is. I think that Bill Weld and Schultz offer something that's interesting to me.
What's that?
And it's not sexy, but they talk about the debt. And the debt is a major problem. In 10 years, it's going to be 93% of GDP. Someone has to address it. And
Republicans would vote for a social liberal like Bill Weld. Can you imagine that?
I would.
Fair enough. Anthony, nice to see you.
Thank you, Jim.
Jesse, pleasure
Thanks,
as always.
Jim.
Thanks so much for your time, both of you.